Finding the legal dream. It doesn't just happen by accident. You don't just end up at the ideal firm or chambers. Some may, but that's not everyone. And I'll tell you, some people unfortunately end up either at an employers that they're settling for or they hate. They're doing a practice area that they're not really that interested in. Or unfortunately, some people walk away from the profession entirely. So the purpose of today's video is to provide you with a research matrix that is going to give you legal direction, and it's going to identify the best firm or chambers that you're suited to, and that's going to significantly increase your chances of securing pupillage or a training contract. Guys, it's nice to have you back on the channel. If you're new here, my name's Taz and I'm a future trial lawyer based in the UK. For today's video, I've created a free Notion template, which is down in the description below. So feel free to just duplicate that over to your Notion. Before we get to the legal matrix, there's two things that you need to know with certainty. The first is which branch of the profession, i.e. do you want to be a solicitor or barrister, do you want to pursue? And then the next, which we're going to discuss in a second, is which city or cities do you want to practice in? So if we start off with the first one, which branch of the profession are you interested in? If you're not sure, many of us aren't, then the advice is go out there and do a VAC scheme or a mini pupillage. I've previously done a video on the mini pupillage process, so feel free to check that out. But really, that's going to tell you with certainty which branch of the profession is for you. The VAC schemes and mini pupilages are also going to help you identify which area of practice or practices you're interested in. So make sure when you're applying, do the areas that you think you're interested in, and by the time you come to the end of finishing the voluntary process, you will have a rough but an idea about which practice areas you want to go into. Once you've got the branch down, you need to think about, okay, realistically, where can I see myself living, enjoying, most importantly, and actually practicing law? So things like, where are your friends based? Where are your family based? What cities do you actually like? What cities are dumps that you want to avoid? All these things you've got to be real about from the outset. And once you've whittled that down, I would recommend choose 3 cities, your primary city, your secondary, and then your tertiary, and just focus your applications on firms or chambers in those locations. One final point to mention before we get stuck in, and I get asked this question a lot: how many applications should I send out in an application cycle? So an application cycle is a 12-month period. In terms of how many you should send out, well, it comes down to what cycle are you in. If you're in your first cycle, don't worry about the number. Focus on the quality. There's a lot of work to do on the first cycle, writing your work experience, answering the questions, which is like a mini dissertation in itself. And then obviously you're drilling interview technique. So don't worry about the number, focus on the quality and you'll be fine. After your first cycle, up the stakes. So try and go for 10, 15 if you can, 20 if you can. And then after that, 20 plus, because it will get easier and easier. You'll have templates, you'll have things that you can just tweak and polish as opposed to drafting the whole thing from scratch. So yeah, for me, for example, my first cycle I sent out 2 or 3, second cycle 6, then 12, then 15, and then my final cycle, which was my 5th cycle, I sent out 24. Once you know the branch of the profession, the practice area or areas that you're interested in, and the city or cities, then you have enough information to use this research matrix. And I'm going to walk you through the overview of how it works, and then we're going to dive into each database individually. The research matrix, as you can see, consists of essentially 3 databases. Tier 1 is the Longlist, Tier 2 is the Shortlist, and then Tier 3 is the application tracker. And how this process works is basically, you know the firm or chambers in the cities that you're interested in, you know which firms or chambers in those cities practice X, and you can go about uncovering that through using the Student and Chambers book. You can go online and there's a list of firms or chambers and what practice areas that they do in those cities. The point here, guys, is once we've identified those firms, we're going to plug them into our Longlist database. And then what we're going to do is go through each of those firms or chambers systematically and profile their recent trainees or pupils, have a look at essentially who they've been hiring, where do you rank, and by going through this process, you're going to come to the end of the process with the long list where you're going to have a number of firms or chambers that you can plug into your shortlist. Now, once you've plugged them into your shortlist, the Longlist effectively identifies a good candidate organization fit. The shortlist now is designed to identify the top, medium, and low, your top, medium, and low priority firm or chambers that you want to apply to. The way you're going to go about doing that is pulling the relevant information from each of those firms or chambers into this database, and by the end of the process, it's going to be very clear which should be your top, medium, and low priority. And once you have them, you're going to plug them into the application tracker, and as it says at the bottom, this is going to be your greatest ally on the road to securing your training contract or pupillage. Okay, now that we've been through an overview of the research matrix, I'm going to walk you through how to use it step by step, starting off with the long list, then we're going to move on to creating the shortlist, and then we're going to end on the application tracker. So let's say we have no idea about which firm or chambers we want to apply to. Now I'm going to just show 3 ways we can get a bit of this information. The first is come to chambersstudents.co.uk/guides. This is a really good guide. It's called the Student Guide to Law Firms and the Bar. Download it here. It's 105 pages, bit of a snooze fest, but we don't need to worry ourselves with all of it. We can skip to the part that we're interested in, which is, for solicitors, it's page 56. And this, for example, we can see the top one gives you the firm name, Adelshaw Goddard, where their offices are, salaries, how many trainees they're taking, when's the deadline, and what seat options that they do. For barristers, it is page 85. Okay, so we can see here, the problem with this one for the bar is that it gives you the name of the chambers, but it doesn't really tell you what they practice. So it gives you the name, location, etc., but it doesn't give you the practice area. So let's start off with this guide to begin to get a more clear picture of those initial criteria that we discussed: city, practice area, etc. For the bar, we can go to chambers.com, and once you arrive at this website, if you click on guides and click on UK bar, you can just choose the area that you're interested in, and it will give you a drop down of what area: London, Scotland, the regions. Let's click search. There we go. As you can see here, giving you the chambers that are in this practice area. That's for barristers. You've got the true picture for solicitors. Again, we can go to chambersandstudents.co.uk, and if we click on law firms and true picture for solicitors, we can just select the firm, location, practice area, and we can search firms by doing it this way. It's worth noting for barristers, you can use the pupillage gateway to help you create this long list. There's a nice search navigation feature to identify which chambers are practicing what and what areas you're interested in to help you create that long list. Now, let's say we've got the firms or the chambers. We're going to enter the tier 1 long list, and I'm going to just explain roughly how this works. So for every firm or chambers, you're going to input the information of their pupils or trainees into one of these tables. You can see organization B, C, D, and E, and F. And once you've reached the maximum, if you just click these 6 dots and click duplicate, we're going to create another one. If you click the 6 dots on the table, we're going to create another table. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to do this together. So, and let's type in, as an example, Park Square Barristers. If you go on their website, and let's see here, barristers. Obviously, this isn't going to be the same for every site, but more or less, this is the process. As we can see here, all their barristers are here. So if we scroll to the very bottom, that's normally where it is. We can see their recent pupils. Now, because I went to bar school with Mr. Doyle, who recently secured pupillage, congrats Tom, we're going to use him as an example. This is basically his profile. As you can see here, it's a summary of what he does, his year of call, his education. He went to University of Liverpool, which university he went to, his career so far, where he's a member of, and his awards. I'm trying to think, does it say his classification? Yes, it does. First class. Well done. So what we're going to do basically is we are going to pull all this information into our table. So if we go back here and we change this to Park Square Barristers. We know that he got a first. Yes, he does have a master's, LLM. So we're going to tick this for Mr. Doyle. He went to the University of Liverpool. In terms of his awards, we can see that he won the Lord Denning Scholarship. Let's put that in. Not sure if it says if he has any extracurriculars. Let's just say, for example, he likes to ski. Let's say he's got experience abroad, and interestingly, let's have a look if it gives us his age. May not give us his age. We can go roughly off the photo. We can also go roughly off when his education. We know that he did his undergrad in 2018, so we can go from there. Let's say he's 28. I forgot to mention the reason we're taking the age is because some firms or chambers like to hire younger candidates. Some prefer to hire older candidates with a lot more experience. So we can see from completing the profile which age bracket they're hiring in and whether we fall in that, and why the age bracket's also important, because if they're hiring 35-year-olds plus and this is their second career and they're only taking 1 or 2, it's a wasteful application, because it's very unlikely, if that's a list of 30, 35-year-olds that they've taken, you're going to be able to compete with them. So it's worth noting the age. Now, as we go through every pupil, we're not going to do it now because otherwise we'd be here all day. As we go through every pupil, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we are going to get a rough idea of who this chamber's like to hire. And we're going to do this for every single organization. And by the time that we've gone through them all, we are going to see where, based on the data, that we fit in. And we're going to take those organizations and we're going to make a list of them here. And these organizations, the one that we align with, are going to be the organizations that we are going to plug in to our shortlist. The final thing I want to say is, once we have our list, it doesn't mean that you can only plug in chambers that you align with, because at the end of the day, you can be the exception to the rule. So put some exceptions into the shortlist, but it just means that your shortlist isn't flooded with exceptional applications and you're wasting a lot of your energy and time applying to places where you have a much less chance of securing that training contract or pupillage. For the long list, anything that is over 60% in terms of compatibility goes on the long list. So you throw all the organizations into those spreadsheets, and once you've looked at the profiles as a whole, if you match with more than 60% of them, then it goes on your long list. If you don't, it gets axed. Now that we've got our long list, let's go through the process for the shortlist. So let's go into tier 2 shortlist. And this is one database, guys, as opposed to the tier 1 database. You're doing it individually for each, and then you're creating a list at the bottom. This is just one database. And how this works basically is we are going to plug all the firms or chambers in from the long list, and we're going to go through them systematically, and this database is going to create a very true or accurate picture of where we want to apply, where we fit in well with, what our priorities are based on all the information in this table, which we're going to go through now. So let's just dive in. We're in the organization profile, and we're going to use the chambers that we used for the long list, which was Park Square Barristers. So let's go through this website. It's going to be a bit tedious, but I think it's worth showing you one proper example so you can go from there. We can see here they're in Leeds and Middlesbrough. There are self-employed chambers, so the private sector. We're going to have a look at their dates for pupillage. So it's available from the 4th of January. And the deadline, I believe, is the 8th of February. This table can be used by either aspiring training solicitor or aspiring pupil barrister. This column, though, is specifically for barristers. It's to identify is the chambers on the gateway or off the gateway. Let's see how many they're taking. They're advertising for 2 candidates. And it's interesting to know this because sometimes you'll see that a set's taking 4 or 5, or a firm's taking 20 or 30, and another set or firm may be taking 1 or 2, and you're like, am I actually going to spend a lot of my time filling out an application that's asking 6 or 7 questions when they're hiring 1 or 2 people? Just lets you know where to direct your energy better. This is all a game, guys. It's all playing the odds. So 27k, pump that number in. Obviously everyone wants to know what the bag is. It's always one of the most important things on the table. We're going to have a look quickly at what this chambers specializes in. So if we click specialisms, we can just type in these four, which are criminal, family, and civil. Okay. For the culture, most organizations will have a culture. Normally it's in the About Us. Click on About Us. Here we go. Why we're different. More or less, this is what they pride themselves on. The fact that they're progressive, the fact that they're a one-stop shop, they're helpful and approachable, strong team players, so there's an emphasis on teamwork here. These we're going to plug in as the culture. And just add in all the buzzwords for the culture. Who are their competitors? Now, really, the way we're going to go about finding this, we're going to type in Park Square Barristers, and it's either through Chambers and Student, or it's going to be Legal 500 if it's for the solicitor profession. So if we just look here and look for the one that says Chambers, here we go. It says that if we scroll down, this is their profile. And if we go to the bottom, it says that they are, for crime, they're a set 1. So we can see here, view profile, and we can just actually click on, you can see here, we can go back to crime in North in Eastern Bar. So UK Bar, Northeastern, and here we can see that they're in band 1, and we can also see Exchange Chambers, they're in band 2. And below that, we can see other chambers, Broadway House, Deer Street Barristers, Trinity Chambers. Based on the fact that this is the awards for crime, we know that while they might not be their direct competitors, these are people in their space. So that's one way of finding out competitors. For solicitors, we're going to use the Legal 500. So let's say Travis Smith, for example, and we're going to type in Legal 500. Remember, I've said we're either going to use Chambers and Student, or we are going to use the Legal 500. We'll click on this. We can see here that it says Travis Smith LLP, and that they are tier 1 for corporate and commercial. So if we click here, this is giving us all the firms which are in their space. As we can see, we've got Addleshaw, Denton's, DLA, all in this tier 1 ranking. We have enough information to plug in the competitors. Let's just say Exchange Chambers for PSQB. Noteworthy lawyers. This will really depend. This will depend on, it could be noteworthy in that you've met one of them at an away day, or it could be noteworthy in that you've read up on a particular case and they were the lawyer dealing with it, in which case we would note this down here. To find out noteworthy lawyers and noteworthy cases, what we're going to do is, there's a few ways of doing this. Let's go back to Park Square Barristers. The first way is by just going to their news section, pick the area of law that you're applying for, and just scroll through until you find a case. Sometimes you'll enter an article and it will have a link to, for example, here, a case that was a rape case done by one of their barristers. It doesn't give us the case name, but it does give us a name here, so we could reference that case if we've come up with nothing. Now, that is one way of doing it. Another way is by not even referencing the case name and just referencing the barrister without referring to the actual case name. Some of these cases don't give the name for obvious reasons, so it can be difficult to find, but if we're persistent, we can find a case name. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, outside of the Chambers website, is by doing this. Chambers and Students. So we've typed in Park Square Barristers, Chambers and Students, and we're going to have a look at their profile here. And as we scroll through, let's go Richard Wright, KC. Sometimes we can find cases that they've recently acted on. For example, prosecuting Powell Realwicks for the rape and murder of Hull student Libby Squire. So this is another example of being able to identify a case and demonstrating interest that we can find through Chambers and Partners. Equally, if we go through Legal 500, our lawyers' profiles, there we go. So let's click on Mr. Spencer Summerfield. From my own research, I could never find any of this online. It's kind of just something you learn to do as you're applying. But we can see if we scroll down here, it's giving us information of what he's been involved in. And this, if you can't find a case, you've got more than enough information here as an aspiring solicitor to demonstrate interest in that you know what cases they've been involved in, what's going on, etc. A lot of this you can find through the individual solicitor profile on the Legal 500. Okay, so let's continue filling this out. So for the noteworthy lawyers, we're going to type in Richard Wright, KC. Let's say the case is RVG 2023. Now for awards, we're simply to find out what awards they've won. We're going to do this one of three ways. We're going to go onto their site. Normally they're plastered all over their website. Obviously they're trying to promote business to get clients. If we see here top tier firm 2020, 2023, Chambers of Partners, and if we just have a bit of a browse through the news section on the site, you're going to find it somewhere. So if you don't find it on the website and you just type in, the next way is type in PSQB Legal Awards. This is for either or, guys. You do this for either for the Chambers or for the law firm. Here we can see Yorkshire Law Award 2022. So that's the second way of doing it, and the final way of doing it is just by typing the name in and typing Chambers and Student Awards. All these awards are going to start popping up. So as you can see, take your pick. You can see here all these different awards, and we're just going to put one in and move on. Now this is what are the unique selling points of this firm. Now this question, the reason why it's in the table is because when they ask you in the application, why do you want to work at this Chambers or why do you want to work at this law firm? You need to know what separates that organization from the hundreds of other organizations out there. And this is where this section comes in handy. You're going to go through the website and you're going to look for stuff that they're doing which is different than other people. Do they have a unique advocacy program? Are they doing some well-being initiative? Whatever it may be, it's going to go in here, and you're going to come back to this when you apply to that organization. That's going to be your part of your reason why that you want to work there. It shows that you've done the homework, you've researched them, you know more about them. Resources, I've included this because it's always actually helpful to, if we type in this example, this will make the point. Let's say St. John's Barristers. From my recollection, they had a document, and some firms and chambers do when you're applying for pupillage or training contract. They'll create documents which you should look at. You see here the pupillage guide for 2023, which is extremely useful when you're applying. Certain chambers, if we type in this, these documents, guys, they tend to let you know specifically what they're looking for, what is their criteria. So it's extremely important you actually look at this. If we look at Red Lion Chambers, for example, it tells you here that what they're interested in, what their focus is on. And if we scroll down, it says what the application criteria is. You would be a fool not to have read this before applying to this place. So we can see what they're valuing, what they're focused on, undergrad education, the BBTC, written communication, legal experience. All of this is extremely rich gold mine for you to have in the back pocket. So we will download this pupillage guide, and then we're just going to throw it in to this table. There we go. Okay, I'm on the free plan, so we can't do that for now, but we can compress it and throw it in. Next, we're going to add in who is the point of contact for that chambers or firm, who's the HR point of contact. And then, as I've showed you previously, if you go through Legal 500 or Chambers and Students, they may include who their clients are. They may be on their website. Legal 500. We pick the individual solicitor. Here, it's helpful to know this is their key clients. Sometimes it's very useful to know what the clients are when you're going to interview. Finally, in terms of the notes, previously from the Longlist, you would have assessed, are they Oxbridge heavy? Is there certain bits of information that you've learned throughout your research which is important to bring in? And you would include that here. Then specifically, I've put a section here for training contracts and pupilages where you talk about what seats that they're doing, what's unique about their pupillage scheme, do you get 1 or 2 supervisors, all this information you would include here. You'd then paste a link to their website here, just useful to be able to click on it. You'd paste a link to their news and article section here. This is going to come in handy, so you're on top of it. If you get an interview, you want to be up to date with what their news is, what their articles are, etc. Any helpful videos or podcasts they've released, include it here. Careers and events, any careers and events that you've been to, I would include it here, because for example, you can say, well, I attended an open day on the 25th of September. And that way, when you come to interview, you've got that date flagged in your mind as to when you went to that open day, who you met, etc. All those details you'd include here. And then finally, guys, do you have any special knowledge about these people from a friend, a trainee who works there, something that you've been told in passing that may prove useful when you come to interview? Finally, once you've got all that information in there, you're going to give this chambers or firm a ranking based on all the information, the salary, etc. Where do they rank in terms of the city, the organization, the interests, the practice areas, all of it, and you'll give them a ranking, 5-star, etc. And by the end, once you've plugged in all the organizations, we finally got to the end of this table. I know it's been a long one. We are going to give them a ranking. Are they a top, medium, or low priority firm or set? So you've added all the organizations into the organization profile spreadsheet. You've got to the end of it. You've given them all a ranking. By the end, based on all the information you have for those organizations, you will have your top, medium, and low priority list. And then essentially you would organize all that data, and we move into the final stage, which is the application tracker. We've got the organizations. We know who our priorities are. We are going into the application tracker now. So the way I do this is in an application cycle, let's say you're applying for 20, you want to apply 5 applications are going to go to your top priority sets. 10 applications are going to go to your medium priority, and then your 5 applications are going to go to low priority sets. Once we know who our priorities are, it's just plugging them in here. Let's say exchange chambers is a priority. We're going to include the resources here because this is going to remind us that when we're actually filling out the application for this chambers, let me go back and reference those documents they've provided as to what criteria they're interested in terms of what things might have an impact on the application, what are they looking for, what they're assessing. So it's a physical reminder for when you come to fill out this application. Okay, yes, I've got those documents that they've provided. We're going to plug in the application deadline date here, let's say the 8th of February. Once we've sent the application, we're going to click application sent, so we know we've got a visual reminder it's gone. This is going to also be an additional bit of pressure if we've got loads of boxes which aren't ticked to get on top of things. And then we're basically including where are we up to, what's the stage, are we at first interview, second interview, is it the offer we've all been wanting, or unfortunately is it a rejection? It just gives you the information you need once you're in that application cycle and 15 applications have gone out. You know where you're up to for everyone. And then I've included these sections here. At the end of every interview, the very first thing that you do is you write down the questions. As soon as you've walked out of that interview, what questions was I asked in the interview? Straight onto your iPhone, notes, or Android, whatever it may be. And you're going to put those questions into this table. You're then going to include any exercises that you were given to prepare or just presented in the interview. You're going to include that here. Again, we're going to have the HR point of contact. Why are we including it here? Because however that interview's gone, we are going to message them and ask them for feedback. Once we sent the feedback request out, we're going to give this a tick, and then we're going to do a bit of self-reflection. What went well in that interview? Okay, were you confident? Were you nervous? Were you too nervous? In which case you would count that as a loss. Just the good and the bad, basically, guys. What did you do well? What did you do not so well? And then once the feedback comes in through some HR point of contact, we are going to sling that into the improvement section. Final thing to mention, I included this on my LinkedIn. If they refuse to give you feedback, you can put in a subject access request for the interview information on you, which should contain some level of notes as to how you were graded, which will be extremely helpful moving forward. Whew, we got there in the end. I know that was a long one, but hopefully it's been extremely useful for you all. Just to summarize, we're creating a long list. We're whittling that long list down by profiling who works there. When we have more of a 60% match with the people who work there, we're going to include that in our long list. Then we're going to pull those into our shortlist. We're going to research the chambers or the firm through filling out the columns I've included. Based on all that information, we're going to establish who our top, medium, and low priority firms or chambers are, and then we are going to plug them into the application tracker and stay on top of them as we go through the process. Guys, good luck. I wish you well. Other than that, guys, you know what it is. See you at the next one.